All right, what's up, y'all? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, a clothing company where we address the human body's natural function, coming at it through the skeletal system, the thing that doesn't change, because the fat content of the human being does change. The muscle mass amount does change as well, but the body just has its only foundational neutral position in every joint of it, and it has to be within that. So we come at it through clothing because it's the only thing placed physically onto our bodies at all times. It's the only thing that has that high of potential to alter our body's natural / only workings. Now, I'm going to address, there's probably some noise here throughout this video, and I like that. As I've mentioned within the videos the past couple days that I filmed at this location, just to show how real In the Image Clothing Company really is. I'm not trying to make it something it isn't. I'm not trying to make it overly professional. I'm just being raw and real. Out here, no special mics and any noise that comes up, okay? So I've got a couple pair of pants here. My shirt's tucked in, and the reason is, if you've seen my shirt tucked in other videos under In the Image Clothing Company, I'm going to be talking about pant waistlines. That's usually, at least around this time, the only reason my shirts are tucked in. So we'll get into it. I'll talk about first all three sides of our company, where clothing has to sit, and then we'll get into this video, which, yeah, it's about keeping pants higher in the front, okay? So we address, like I said, how to keep the body unaltered with a spine, with a sternum, with a trachea, a nose, a jaw that naturally stabilizes the whole body, and all these things that have to stay in the center line of the human being that is there, and there's no opinion to have, because gravity on our earth pulls us straight down, and there's two sides opposing these things that I mentioned that are in the center. Now, if there's any imbalance in clothing whatsoever, that center line won't be there, and the body will be damaged. It'll be doing compensations. So we, on this side, the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, talk about more things than just what I've mentioned there. But in addition to getting in depth with the anatomy of the body and how to just keyword allow the human body to work, we talk about eating naturally, sleeping, staying hydrated, what that really means, standing, sitting, walking, just allowing the body to do all of its functions, being a mechanical machine, the way that our living God, Jesus Christ, designed our bodies. That's where our company name comes from. The first three words in the five as a whole, in the image, those ones of In the Image Clothing Company. We are designed in the image of our living God, Jesus the Christ. And so we don't get to decide how our bodies work. There's an episode of one of the thirds of our company, which is In the Image Clothing Company podcast, with discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, titled, "We Didn't Design It, We Can't Decide It," and that's how it is with our human bodies. So yes, that's one of the other thirds of our company. Then we also have In the Image Clothing Company music, where I'm a fingerstyle guitarist, and I address setups of guitars to just allow the body to stay unaltered, and all the other things that we get into with music as well, we do over there. You can hear music that I've made, just where you can find In the Image Clothing Company music. Now, clothing for everybody, man, woman, tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, any time period to ever be. Clothing has a certain location. It has to be angle-wise and fitting-wise, because the body will only ever work the way that it was designed to. Now, our pants, as mine are here, which you can see because my shirt's tucked in, need to be entirely above our hips, all the way off of this pelvis. It's a whole system. There's rotations going into the pelvis. There's hinging happening at the pelvis. There's so many muscles. There's so much musculature that feeds into the pelvis. The core goes down into the pelvis. The legs come up. The front muscles, inner muscles, outer muscles, rear muscles, all the muscles that really do any part of anything that at least one end adheres to the pelvis, that's all going to be affected if these waistlines that we wear are actually on the functionality of all that. So right there, all the way above, and with the angle, it needs to be slightly higher in the front than the rear. That's what this video is titled, Keeping Pants Higher in the Front, right? It has to, because these are our core muscles. As I was discussing all those functionalities of the body that feed into the pelvis, these core muscles here as any muscle ever within the body, it only can work by getting shorter. So they have to contract to activate. And the body will naturally always be activated as a whole, unless or until, ideally never until, altered, okay? So that's how we allow that to happen. Now with the tops that we wear, the seams on top of our shoulders need to be evenly behind these little bones at the peak of our shoulders, because our shoulders naturally sit behind our body, behind the head. That's just where they connect with these upper trapezius muscles along the spine and to the very base of the rear of the skull and the shoulder back here, okay? So with the edge seams of our shoulders, they need to be right at the very edges. That's where the functionality is. There's a hinge here with rotations and all the things that the ball and socket joint of the shoulder have, okay? So In The Image Clothing Company has two things we call prerequisites, just to further aid in no alteration to the body. The reason why they're separate from clothing fitting is because there's not always shoelaces in what we place on our feet. There's not always tags within the clothing we wear. But there is only one way to weave a rope across the top of the human foot that is shaped the way the top of the human foot is shaped. That is what we call In The Image Clothing Company's shoelace technique. Find wherever you find In The Image Clothing Company on the internet. It is the 26th of March 2025. So there you go. With that, we tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside to the center line of the body on both feet. Otherwise, damage. Period and done. So secondly, we remove all tags. Anywhere a tag is placed within clothing, it's causing a physical gap, altering the skeletal system's only working position, and or not allowing the musculature against the tag to activate. And then there's other parts of the body doing some sort of compensation. The body will only, as I've said, ever work as a whole. If there's anything within the body that isn't working correct, something else and many things have to do some sort of compensation, and there you have pain, chronic patterning, damage to the human being, and that's what we address here, right? So yes, keeping pants higher in the front than the rear. I've been wearing these pants. I got them recently. These are the last pair of pants that I have received, acquired, purchased, right? And I actually got them with these ones here at a thrift store, both of them. But I've been wearing these pants since then, and in the times that I have, they've actually been slightly lower in the front. And I've been legitimately repenting for it because I'm damaging my body. I was noticing today and the past few days, I've felt so much more thirsty because my core hasn't been able to fully activate. My hips haven't been able to fully elongate here at the hip flexors. My glutes haven't been able to be fully activated, and my body has been compensating. My breathing has been taking effect by it. I was gonna use the word suffering. That's why I stuttered, but I didn't want it to be something so dramatic, but that's really the case. And so it's literally been repentance of, hey, I'm sorry that I've been wearing these because it's been damaging my body. And I've made a couple videos, 3 actually, as far as I'm aware, in the past few days with these pants on in this location. So within those videos, yes, my pants were in an incorrect location. Transparency, I'm trying to make this as real as it is, okay? But what I've done is along this bottom little lip of this waistband, I've taken scissors and just put little slits right here, 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 and here, okay? On this little, like 1 to 2 millimeter little lip underneath the waistband there. That's all that it needs, and then it can kind of fold in at those snips and it'll come higher in the front. When we talk about the dreaded collar seam modification under In The Image Clothing Company, we make that snip on the top of the collar, same length, about 1 to 2 millimeters, and because it's snipped on the top, it allows where that collar seam is to drop. Here, because it's snipped on the bottom, it allows the pants to come up. What'll happen is on folds like that of material, the side you snip it on is the side that it will move away from. So that's what I've done with these to allow them to be higher in the front than the rear, because these actually, just because of the design of them, I love the pleats, but they still had an angle that was lower in the front when I first purchased them. So what I will say is, if you are going to do snips like this, I understand now it's visible, right, to the people who are looking at your pants, but it's beneficial to do it on the outside rather than if there was a way to do a similar thing on the inside of this bottom part of the waistband, because our hips come like this. The hip bones, they kind of protrude in the front a little bit, regardless of the amount of fat content you've got or whatever your body is shaped like. The actual structure of the bones themselves, they're going to be pushing against the pants because the pants will be above the bone, and doing this on the outside allows the pants to kind of come out rather than doing it on the inside. It might do it the opposite direction and actually kind of get in the way of your hips and maybe push them anterior like this rather than allowing like space for your hip flexors to elongate. Okay, so that's why it's good to do it on the outside. I understand though, visually now you can tell that it's been cut. So I'm gonna show what I've done here with these white pants. With these ones, as you can tell, I've cut my belt loops off. I do that. I've mentioned and discussed, actually the video that I made yesterday in this location, that would have been the 25th of March 2025, I titled it something like keeping shoulders and, no, actually I titled it how clothing can connect shoulders and hips, and we don't want that, right, if the shoulder's grabbing on the belt loops. So I cut my belt loops off if they are there, almost always at least, and at this time at least, right? But with these pants, as you can see, from where the bottom of the belt loop was stitched here to the actual like waistband, this little span right here, there's the same material that the belt loop was, but it's stitched against the actual pant. Now, you can see it's here, 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 but then when I flip it around to the front of the pants, I cut this out here and here. And what that does is a very similar thing to what these little snips that I've done here do, and they allow this to just open up more in the front. Now when you wear these pants, they will be allowed to come slightly higher in the front than the rear. So that's one way you can do it as well. And with these corduroy pants here, very similar in ways, right? I've cut all the belt loops off, so there's no grip from the actual loop itself that could get caught on the tops that we wear. And these though have a drawstring that I put into them. I've done this with multiple pants. I've just put little holes with scissors into the sides of where the button's at, and then I've stuck a rope, a piece of paracord into the waistband. I love paracord in the ways that I do. I'm not so fond of synthetic materials in any way, but this isn't actually against the body, but there's no give, right? So the cord doesn't have to try to like predict what's happening to something it can't that's stretchy. Now, what I do though with this, I've shown this before, the knot that we use under In The Image Clothing Company when it comes to a drawstring, but it's called a slipped lap knot. And so I'm not gonna really show exactly so detailed on how to do it because we have a video where I show it. Look up In The Image Clothing Company how drawstrings affect body mechanics and you can find it. But what happens then when you tie a slipped lap knot, L-A-P-P, then it's entirely horizontal. So in that case, now what happens here, and this is the same with pajama pants, sweatpants, right, whatever it is, ideally 100% natural materials against the body always, but if you do wear something like that, like 100% cotton pants that you'd wear to sleep, what will happen is, because this in the front is halfway between the waistband and in the rear, it needs to be allowed to get all the way up inside. So if there is that stitch in the center here, I've talked about that before, we need to just unpick that little stitch. You can do it with scissors, you can do it with a seam ripper, but sometimes you'll have the waistband here, right? the drawstring going through, and in the rear it's stitched. We can't be having that because it's going to just pull the spine around. It's going to cause excess gap there, which will just push the pelvis anterior, and it's also going to cause the rear to be higher in the front anyway, in the rear, if there's a stitch in the rear. So no stitch in the rear, no belt loops right on the spine, as I talk about. Ideally nothing, right? Because we remove all tags, so no tag on the spine, because in order to get the pelvis higher in the front, the rear needs to be able to be flat against the back. If there's a gap there between the pants and the actual spine, then your pelvis itself will just go lower in the front, and that's very damaging. So this is a way to do it, okay? Because since it is halfway between in the front, that will actually cause it to come higher, so then the rope itself will meet the same level of it coming to the very top of the waistband in the rear, and it will sit similar to that, right? So this is the front, this is the rear, and that's about how much higher it will be, just because as you can see, that's where the rope would be from front to back. So there we go. Those are a few ways to allow pants to stay higher in the front than the rear. One thing is so important, there's a video under In The Image Clothing Company titled How Zippers Affect Body Mechanics, and I went over the zipper modifications that we do. This flap here is very commonly stitched with just a small little stitch here against this, so that it's not just flapping. This has the purpose of protecting your body from the zipper, which is beneficial, but we need to cut that out as I show within that video. And also the zipper, because of the way zippers work, they have to interlock, right? Having one higher than the other, we need to be able to have it so the actual part of the pant waist line where it meets together here, like this, we need that to be even here as it is here, right? So just straight across. And so we do just a little snip here as well on the side that is higher to allow it to drop down, and then the waistline itself is even across, okay? And I went into that more thoroughly in that video that I just referenced under In The Image Clothing Company, How Zippers Affect Body Mechanics. So there we go. Those are some ways you can just take pants that didn't come from the factory with the intention of the design allowing them to sit higher in the front than the rear. Do that, okay? Now, I guess this is something that is maybe not apparent to some people, and so I'm going to say it. In other words, this is necessary to hear for the sake of not feeling like you have to have a certain item of clothing from a certain brand or a certain company. Yes, we are In The Image Clothing Company. Yes, we will have clothing available, staying centered, fitting correct, allowing the body to work, made out of 100% natural materials. Make sure that you do purchase it in your size if you ever do. But we're not trying to sell things. We're just going to make products that are very good. If you'd like them, you can purchase them. Up until today's date, which I said it's the 26th of March 2025, we don't have In The Image Clothing Company clothing available yet. So me personally, I've only worn clothing that I've purchased from other people. It's almost been entirely from thrift stores used. So there's some context on, you can take most any design. Some will be much harder. Jeans are just so damaging to the body in many ways I could get into, and I talk about them when I do, but not so much because of how damaging they are. Try to stay away from jeans if you can. Even just the stitch in the rear that's double stitched is so damaging to the body. But most pants, if you can get it to be just an even waistband around to where the rear doesn't have like additional stitches like jeans do often, right? Like this, or you know, extra pockets, like a coin pocket only on one side or whatever. Just pretty quote unquote generic pants, if you will. Most of them you will be able to do simple modifications like this to just allow them to sit in the locations that they need to for your body to work. So it's not anything you have to go out there and purchase, okay? We have been given this body, our God gave it to us. It's the only thing we actually have in this life. Everything else comes and goes, like the fat content, like the muscle mass amount, okay? But this body is the only thing we have. Everything we do in our lives, we're doing it with this thing being our vessel. In the Image Clothing Company podcast has an episode titled As a Vessel. That's what we are, okay? Physically, our human flesh, it's a mechanical machine. It just has operations. And the waistband of the pants affects breathing patterns. It affects the amount that you perspirate. It affects the arches in your feet. It affects your neutral wrist and everything in between, all over the place, the way that jaw sits. So it's as I talk about. I mentioned similar things within this already, but it's as real as it gets. It's as obvious as it is once you see it. The human body will only ever work the way that it does. Posture comes down to things like this. There's no such thing as posture, quote unquote. There's just the only way the human body would stand vertically, using the least amount of energy on an earth, pulling it straight down with gravity, keeping all of its joints in their neutral position, and that will never be allowed to happen if pants are not, for every human, slightly higher in the front than the rear. So, my name is Evan Strong. Like I said a couple times already within this, it is the 26th of March, 2025. Thank you, and thank you.